It was a warm July morning in 1944 when James and Margaret Thompson, both in their early 20s, set out from their quiet Pennsylvania hometown. They had been married just 2 weeks, still glowing with the excitement and optimism of youth. The couple had planned a short weekend trip to the rolling hills nearby, hoping to escape the monotony of post-war life and enjoy some private time together. No one could have imagined that this simple, innocent journey would end in one of the state's most chilling mysteries. Neighbors remembered seeing the couple leave, their car packed with picnic supplies, blankets, and even a small radio to listen to the news along the way. James waved cheerfully to Mr. and Mrs. Larkin across the street, while Margaret adjusted her hat nervously, a bright smile on her face masking a sense of excitement mixed with the slightest hint of unease. That morning, nothing seemed unusual. Pennsylvania's sun rose over the quiet town, unaware that it would shine over an unfolding nightmare. By the afternoon, the couple was expected to check in at a small inn along the route, a quaint place they had reserved for the weekend. When they never arrived, the innkeeper assumed they had changed plans or decided to turn back home. Yet, as evening crept in and the sun dipped below the horizon, worry began to ripple through the Thompson household. The phone calls went unanswered, and the car was never returned. A sense of dread slowly replaced the initial confusion. Local authorities were alerted, but the investigation quickly ran into dead ends. The roads were quiet that weekend, and there were no eyewitnesses to the car's last location. A few townspeople claimed to have seen a suspicious figure near the wooded area where the couple was heading, but the descriptions were vague and contradictory. The forested hills seemed almost to swallow the Newlyweds, leaving only whispers and speculation in their absence. The idea that 2 young lives could vanish so completely struck fear into the hearts of everyone who knew them. As days turned into weeks, the search expanded into the surrounding countryside. Volunteers combed through fields, rivers, and the thick woods, calling out the couple's names. Flyers were posted in neighboring towns, pleading for information. Yet despite every effort, James and Margaret remained missing. Their disappearance became the talk of the town, a mystery that no one could solve, leaving families and friends haunted by questions that had no answers. The sense of unease in the community grew, a quiet, gnawing fear that something dark and inexplicable had claimed the young newlyweds. Decades after James and Margaret vanished, the area where they were last seen had grown quiet and overgrown. The roads were cracked, trees crept over fences, and the once bustling fields now whispered with the wind. Most locals had forgotten about the couple, or at least tried to. But fate had a way of resurfacing what was long buried. During a demolition project on an abandoned military property just outside the town, construction crews stumbled upon something that would reignite the town's darkest memories, a massive concrete bunker, almost perfectly concealed beneath layers of earth and debris. The bunker's entrance had been hidden behind decades of overgrowth. Thick vines curled around the rusted steel doors, and the concrete itself bore cracks and stains from years of neglect. The workers initially thought it was just an old storage facility or perhaps a forgotten part of wartime defenses. But as they cleared away the soil, the sheer size of the structure became apparent. It wasn't just a small underground shelter. It was massive, sprawling, and ominously silent, as if holding its breath, waiting to be discovered. Authorities were quickly called to the scene, but even they approached cautiously. The bunker had been built to withstand bombings, with walls nearly 2 feet thick and a labyrinth of corridors that twisted into darkness. The air around it felt heavier, colder, as if the building itself exuded a sense of foreboding. Some officers reported hearing faint, almost imperceptible sounds, whispers of metal shifting or water dripping, but when they investigated, there was nothing. The structure seemed alive in its silence, a tomb for secrets long hidden. As investigators examined the entrance, they noticed strange symbols scratched into the steel door and graffiti that hinted someone had been inside long ago. Faded words in block letters, partly erased by time, read like warnings, "Do not enter and they watch." The deeper the team looked, the more it became clear that this wasn't a simple storage bunker. It had been used for something far more sinister, something people in the town had only hinted at in hushed tones. Rumors of secret wartime experiments, of lives lost beneath the earth, began to swirl again, and the mystery of the Newlyweds' disappearance took on a chilling new context. By the time the team was ready to breach the bunker, anticipation and fear hung thick in the air. Each step toward the entrance felt heavy, as if the ground itself resisted their intrusion. What lay inside had been untouched for decades, sealed away from the world, hiding truths that some might have wished never to uncover. Little did anyone know, behind that steel door were remnants of lives lost, objects frozen in time, and clues that would ultimately link this bunker to the vanished Newlyweds in ways no one could have imagined. The darkness inside promised secrets, and history was about to reveal horrors long buried. When the steel doors of the bunker finally groaned open, the investigators were hit with a wave of cold, stale air that smelled of mold, rust, and something far more sinister. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating walls of cracked concrete and floors littered with debris. At first glance, it appeared abandoned, a relic of forgotten times. But as the team stepped cautiously inside, the unsettling realization dawned. This was no ordinary bunker. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets, every shadow a hidden story waiting to be uncovered. The first shocking sight was the remains of furniture that had been used but left to decay: metal beds with torn mattresses, scattered medical tools, and overturned chairs. The equipment suggested something far more clinical than domestic. Thermometers, syringes, and rusted metal instruments lay strewn across the floor. Among the debris were notebooks and papers, yellowed and brittle with age, some containing crude sketches of human anatomy. Investigators exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that they had stepped into a place where ordinary lives had collided with something dark and inhuman. As they ventured deeper, they discovered photographs tucked in a corner of a rusted filing cabinet. The black and white images were of people, some restrained, some unconscious, posed as if for medical records, yet the expressions on their faces told a story of fear and pain. There were charts with numbers, letters, and dates, suggesting careful documentation. Forensic experts who later reviewed these materials would describe a chill that ran through them just holding these papers. It was clear that this bunker had been a site of systematic experimentation, a place where human suffering had been treated like a science project. Even more disturbing were the personal effects they uncovered: a locket engraved with initials, a pair of delicate gloves, and letters sealed in envelopes, all untouched by time yet heavy with implication. Among these items were small hints that linked the space to the missing Newlyweds: photographs of James and Margaret, postcards with their handwriting, and a tiny wedding ring. The realization sent a shiver through the team. The bunker had been more than a hidden facility. It had been the final location of the couple, a place where lives had been manipulated, monitored, and ultimately erased from public memory. The atmosphere inside the bunker grew increasingly oppressive as the team explored further. Rusted doors opened into small chambers, each containing evidence of human presence: beds, chairs, and medical paraphernalia carefully arranged as if rituals had been performed. On the walls, faded markings hinted at names, dates, and coded instructions. The silence of the bunker pressed on them like a living weight, and the air seemed charged with decades of unseen suffering. Every step uncovered more pieces of a puzzle too horrifying to imagine, and the investigators realized they had stumbled into a nightmare preserved beneath the Pennsylvania earth. As investigators carefully sifted through the bunker's grim contents, they began to notice personal items that seemed strangely familiar. A folded photograph fell from a rusted drawer, a wedding portrait of James and Margaret Thompson, the couple who had disappeared in 1944. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the team. Here, decades later, were tangible connections to the missing Newlyweds, long presumed lost to time. The photograph, worn at the edges and yellowed with age, seemed almost out of place among the bunker's clinical, sterile remnants. It didn't stop there. In a corner, beneath a pile of decaying blankets, investigators found a small, hand-stitched handkerchief with Margaret's initials embroidered in delicate cursive. Nearby, a notebook contained faint penciled notes, which, upon closer inspection, appeared to reference the couple's names along with cryptic dates and codes. It was clear that someone had been meticulously recording their presence and movements. The realization that the couple's final days were documented in this bunker sent shivers through everyone present. Whoever had taken them had gone to great lengths to keep track of every detail. The evidence became more disturbing as forensic teams uncovered a partially intact filing cabinet. Inside were letters, some unopened, addressed to the Thompsons' families. The envelopes were carefully preserved, as if deliberately placed to be found only decades later. Pages of medical charts listed dates alongside vague descriptions of procedures, sometimes noting subject awake or subject sedated. Though incomplete, the files revealed that the couple had been subjected to repeated observation, treated not as human beings but as objects in a sinister experiment. The cold, methodical documentation left little doubt that James and Margaret had spent their final days in this very bunker. Even the bunker's architecture seemed designed with them in mind. Small, sealed rooms lined the corridors, some containing remnants of the couple's personal belongings: clothing, a pair of worn shoes, and even a small music box, all carefully preserved in the shadows. The spaces suggested isolation, control, and surveillance. Each room appeared to have served a specific function, meticulously planned to monitor and manipulate the occupants. It was a chilling realization. This was not just a hiding place. It had been a calculated prison, with James and Margaret as its primary captives. The more the team explored, the more evidence tied directly to the Newlyweds emerged. Faded inscriptions on the walls, hastily scratched in some areas, bore names and dates matching the timeline of their disappearance. A rusted metal tray contained remnants of a meal, and nearby, small vials and syringes suggested that chemical agents had been administered. Each discovery painted a horrifying picture. The young couple had been more than victims. They had been carefully studied, catalogued, and experimented on. The bunker had kept their story buried for decades, but now, each clue pointed unmistakably to the Thompsons' tragic fate. As the team delved deeper into the bunker, they discovered a narrow passage partially concealed behind a false wall. The entrance was so cleverly hidden that it seemed to have been designed to be nearly invisible, blending seamlessly with the bunker's already oppressive concrete corridors. Flashlights barely cut through the darkness, revealing rough, jagged walls and a faint, damp odor that grew stronger with every step. The tunnels stretched far beyond the initial opening, winding and twisting like a labyrinth beneath the Pennsylvania earth, and immediately, a sense of foreboding settled over the team. The tunnels were not uniform. Some corridors were so tight that investigators had to squeeze through, while others opened into small chambers with evidence of long-forgotten habitation. Faded symbols and cryptic markings were etched into the walls, letters, numbers, and odd geometric patterns whose meaning remained unclear. Some experts suggested these were codes used by whoever operated the bunker to track movements or experimental procedures. Every step deeper felt like stepping back in time, into a world that had been frozen for decades yet remained full of secrets too dark to fully comprehend. Inside one of the larger chambers, the team found remnants of furniture and small personal items, beds with threadbare mattresses, broken chairs, and even a pair of worn shoes. There were notebooks filled with meticulous notes and crude sketches, some of which seemed to describe medical procedures, while others listed dates, times, and names. It quickly became apparent that the tunnels were not merely passageways. They were extensions of the bunker's experimental operations, places where subjects had been held, monitored, and possibly moved from room to room. The more they discovered, the more the scope of the horror became clear. As they ventured further, the investigators found traces of chemical residues along the tunnel walls, alongside small metal instruments and vials. It suggested that these corridors had been used for more than transport. They had likely served as areas for controlled exposure to substances, sedatives, or other unknown compounds. The presence of these items confirmed that this was not a forgotten military storage site, but rather a carefully orchestrated network designed to manipulate and control human subjects. The cold efficiency of it all sent a wave of terror through the team. These tunnels were the arteries of a system that had confined and tormented lives far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Perhaps most chilling of all was the realization that some of the tunnels led to areas partially collapsed or filled with rubble, as if someone had tried to bury certain secrets even further. Within these blocked passages, faint remnants of the past, clothing, tools, and even fragments of documents, suggested that countless horrors had been hidden from the world. Each discovery seemed to whisper of lives lost and experiments conducted in secrecy, with James and Margaret likely among the very first victims. The tunnels themselves became characters in the story, silent witnesses to decades of suffering, their darkness hiding truths that the world had long been denied. As investigators continued to sift through the bunker's grim contents, archival research and recovered documents began to paint a terrifying picture. The structure was not just a hidden shelter, it had been part of a covert wartime project, one that operated in the shadows, far from public scrutiny. Originally built under the guise of military preparedness, the bunker had secretly functioned as a site for human experimentation. Records suggested that the experiments were systematic, highly organized, and intended to test the limits of human endurance, behavior, and resilience under extreme conditions. The recovered journals, though aged and partially decayed, contained chilling accounts from those who had been forced to work there. Scientists and administrators meticulously documented procedures on unwilling subjects, describing the effects of drugs, chemicals, and psychological stress. Names were rarely mentioned, but initials and dates lined the pages like grim echoes of a human ledger. The brutality of the experiments, coupled with the cold, clinical tone of the writings, left investigators horrified. It was clear that whoever ran this facility viewed people not as humans, but as objects to be tested, observed, and discarded. Local historians later confirmed rumors that had persisted in hushed tones for decades. The bunker had ties to obscure wartime research programs that experimented on civilians, often abducted without warning. Many victims were never reported missing, their disappearances quietly covered up by officials who feared public outrage. The Thompson couple, it seemed, had been unfortunate enough to stumble into this dark machinery. Their fate, once a source of whispered speculation, was now slowly coming into focus. Every artifact in the bunker, from photographs to personal belongings, hinted at a deliberate and chilling pattern of abduction, experimentation, and concealment. Even the physical evidence in the bunker corroborated these horrific accounts. Makeshift operating rooms, rusted surgical tools, and vials with unknown residues suggested experiments that were both physical and chemical in nature. Some chambers had writing on the walls detailing experimental procedures, while others contained crude restraints, indicating subjects had been immobilized for extended periods. Forensic analysis later confirmed traces of sedatives and chemical compounds consistent with prolonged human experimentation. The scale of the operation was far beyond anything the town or authorities had imagined, and it became clear that this dark history had been carefully buried to avoid discovery. Perhaps most disturbing was the implication that the bunker was just one of several hidden facilities across the region. References in the recovered journals hinted at a network of secret sites, each operating under the veil of wartime necessity. The newly discovered bunker, with its tunnels, chambers, and evidence of human suffering, was just a fragment of a far larger, more sinister system. The stories, once relegated to whispers, were now undeniable. James and Margaret's disappearance was no accident. It was part of a calculated operation that spanned months, perhaps years, leaving a trail of human misery hidden beneath the Pennsylvania soil. Even after decades beneath the Pennsylvania soil, the bunker's horrors began to surface, forcing investigators to confront a truth that had long been buried. Remnants of the Thompsons' lives, clothes, photographs, letters, were carefully catalogued, each piece a haunting reminder of the couple's final days. Families who had given up hope were finally able to see the tangible proof that their loved ones had been trapped in a nightmare that no one could have imagined. The town, long haunted by whispers and rumors, was suddenly forced to face a chilling reality. The horrors had not been exaggerated. They had been real, deliberate, and meticulously concealed. Forensic teams worked tirelessly to identify human remains and trace the paths of other victims mentioned in the recovered documents. Although some remains were successfully identified and returned to grieving families for proper burials, many more were never recovered, lost to time or destroyed in attempts to erase the evidence. The investigators realized that justice would be only partially possible. They were crimes whose perpetrators had long since died or vanished, and victims whose stories might never be fully told. Yet, the exposure of the bunker itself became a form of accountability, a way to acknowledge the suffering and honor the memories of those who had been silenced. The psychological impact on the community was profound. For years, the story of James and Margaret had existed as a whisper, a cautionary tale to children of a time long gone. Now, with the bunker revealed, fear mingled with grief and anger. Residents who had lived in the area for generations spoke of unexplained sounds, shadows, and a lingering sense of unease that seemed tied to the very land itself. Some claimed they could feel the presence of those who had suffered inside the bunker, as if their spirits had been bound to the place, unwilling to leave even after death. The town became a living memorial to a dark chapter in history that had been almost forgotten. Authorities faced a complex task in piecing together what had happened inside the bunker. Interviews with aging witnesses, analysis of recovered documents, and modern forensic techniques slowly reconstructed the events that had unfolded in 1944. It became clear that the Thompsons were among the first victims of a program that had likely continued in secrecy for years. Investigators documented every discovery with painstaking care, knowing that the evidence, though decades old, could finally tell a story of human cruelty and resilience. The work was grueling, both emotionally and mentally, but it ensured that the truth would not remain buried any longer. Even today, the bunker remains a chilling reminder of what occurred beneath the quiet Pennsylvania hills. It stands as both a warning and a testament, a dark monument to the victims whose lives were taken, manipulated, and hidden from the world. James and Margaret's story, once lost to time, now serves as a haunting example of human cruelty and secrecy. For the town and the families affected, the mystery of their disappearance is partially solved, yet the echoes of the bunker's past linger, whispering of horrors that will forever be etched into the land, the history, and the memory of all who dare to uncover it. As the last echoes of the bunker's horrors come to light, one thing becomes painfully clear. Some secrets refuse to stay buried forever. The walls that hid James and Margaret, the tunnels that concealed unspeakable acts, and the records of human suffering all remind us that darkness often hides in plain sight, waiting decades to be uncovered. Even now, the land above the bunker lies quiet, almost peaceful. But those who know its story understand that beneath the soil rests a past too terrifying to ignore. The vanished Newlyweds' legacy is more than tragedy. It is a warning, a reminder that evil can thrive in silence, and that the truth, no matter how deeply hidden, has a way of breaking through. The bunker may be sealed once again, but its story is alive, etched into the memories of those who discovered it and the history of the town forever. And perhaps, in the stillness of the Pennsylvania hills, if you listen closely, you might hear whispers of those who never left, reminding us that some horrors endure long after the world has moved on. The mystery of James and Margaret may be partially solved, but the chilling question remains: what else lies hidden in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble upon it?
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.